Your players ever cried at your game? If they haven't, then why not? As cool as you might feel in the moment throwing out a massive fireball, wiping out an entire group of bandits, or the overwhelming pride we might feel thrusting our sword and delivering the final blow to the big bad, or even the warm and fuzzy feeling of saving Mittens from a tree, none of these moments will ever truly stick with you the way something like this will.
I really didn't think. I don't know why it didn't occur to me. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe you had me crying in the first session of this game. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Hey guys, just a quick reminder before the video starts that if you like this content and other content like this, please subscribe to the channel. It does help me out a lot. Alright. Thanks. Hi, I'm Billy the Corgi, and in my many sessions as a DM, I believe I found my favorite tool in the Dungeon Master's bag of tricks, making a real emotional connection in the game with the players and their characters.
Where are you? I'm in a glass case of emotion!
And I want to take the time to not only explain why you want to do so, but a few quick tips how to as well. While I've been DMing for a fair bit now, I've noticed I have a tendency to focus on these really big action set pieces. The city is being attacked by giants. Strahd just took over the last safe town in Barovia. There's a dragon terrorizing the village. And while these are definitely great in the moment scenes, I can almost guarantee that in 1 year's time after the campaign has ended, I will remember almost none of it. At most, I'll remember the Cliff Notes version. Oh, yeah, a red dragon did burn down the church that one time. Huh. You know, a few people probably died in there, I think. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have those moments, or that I plan to stop having them anytime soon. Far from it. I'm currently running Tomb of Annihilation on Twitch right now, and I'll tell you I'm very excited for the dinosaur races as well as other spoilery stuff. Even if the satisfaction from all of it is fleeting, it's still necessary for a good game, and it's still a ton of fun. Just like a massive Hollywood blockbuster is completely forgettable, but it's fun to sit down and watch it with a bucket of popcorn. The moments my players remember 2 to 3 years after the campaign has ended are the ones that made them feel something, whether that be shock, disgust, fear, sadness, joy, or any combination of. Those are what really leave an impact on us. To give an example, one of the first campaigns I ran for my players was Curse of Strahd. They had countless fights against werewolves, cultists, vampires, and anything else that was spooky. Despite all that, 2 years later, I can only recall 2 fights in the campaign. And even then, I couldn't tell you who did what. I could really only tell you the aftermath. Obviously, I remember the final fight with Strahd. It'd probably be a massive problem if I didn't, but the other fight I can remember is a small, very small scuffle between my fighter and cleric of the party. So, let me describe the scene. But before I do, there are some minor spoilers for Curse of Strahd. Nothing major or story-breaking, but I feel it's important to get out of the way now. So, let's paint the picture. The player characters are around 7th level at this point of the campaign and beginning to near the end of the adventure. They've faced countless defeats up until this point, with only a small handful of wins every now and again. The players are currently at a den of werewolves, and after having helped the pack with a quest, they have agreed to allow the players custody over the children the wolves had taken from the village in hopes of expanding. Now, there's a few problems here. It's almost nightfall, and the children have all been infected with lycanthropy. The cleric does not have remove curse prepared, and in Barovia, every night is a full moon. So, there's a very clear issue here. The party has an entire clown car of children that will, in a moment's notice, turn on them and begin attacking with the cleric unable to do anything about it. But there is a solution. There is an NPC nearby that is capable of lifting curses. However, due to previous run-ins with the party, as well as this NPC in question having a tendency to, Frankenstein people together, the cleric wanted nothing to do with them. They decide it's best to attempt to keep the children under control for the night, and then the cleric can prepare the spell they need in the morning. However, the fighter, being a father of a young boy, couldn't stand to see the children suffer when there was something they could do about it. So he takes it upon himself to lead these children to the person who can cure them right now, against the wishes of the cleric and the rogue. As the fighter gets to the village gate, he runs into guards who are giving him a hard time for fairly understandable reasons. A man they just met maybe 2 to 3 days ago suddenly comes back to the village with an entire classroom worth of children. While this was happening, the cleric and rogue sneak the children away from the fighter behind his back. When the fighter finds out about this and catches up with the cleric and rogue, all hell breaks loose. Now, this does break a pretty big cardinal rule of D&D I see many tables have, but in the moment, I allowed it as the players seemed okay with it. PvP breaks out, and at this point, everyone was already low on resources due to earlier endeavors throughout the day. While I can't remember every detail of the fight, I do remember the end result. The cleric and the rogue succeed in knocking out the fighter. The cleric, out of pettiness, chooses to not heal the fighter and instead is content with letting him stay unconscious. And wouldn't you know it, in Barovia, things have a tendency to go from bad to worse. After their scuffle is finished, they're greeted by the oh-so-classic... Please don't hate me for using Rick and Morty, it was the best clip I could find. Who is it other than the big man himself, Strahd von Zarovich? This was the absolute worst case scenario. Strahd was not someone the party could handle while they were at their best, much less when their front line is down and the rest of the party is running on fumes. Of course, Strahd is not here for a fight. There'd be no fun in simply killing the players here, and he knows that. He also knows the players, specifically the cleric, was in possession of a relic that might end up being problematic for him in the future, and he'd rather them not have it. So he attempts to charm the cleric, and through some miracle of the dice gods, the cleric actually manages to fail the wisdom saving throw and is now charmed by Strahd. Strahd then attempts to take this relic from the cleric, but the rogue manages to convince the cleric to keep it, as being charmed is not the same as being under mind control. To clarify, being charmed is essentially just seeing the person who has charmed you, in this case Strahd, as someone who you trust as much as you would a family member or a very close friend. Well, there's a fighter unconscious on the ground, not 10 feet away from him, and Strahd has decided that he's not leaving empty-handed. So Strahd picks the fighter up, throws him on the back of his horse, and gives the party one last fanged smile before taking his leave. There's a silence around the table, and then I tell the fighter, here's a character sheet, roll up a new character. And suddenly, there's panic, everyone's freaking out, and it's a night to remember. And, wouldn't you know it, it's the first night they've had in their 4 to 5 weeks of Barovia, where there was a new moon. Now, the reason I tell this long-winded story about a single moment I had from a campaign that lasted somewhere from 4 to 6 months is to prove my point that it's the highly emotional moments from the campaigns that stick with us for years to come. This campaign ended somewhere around 2, maybe 3 years ago, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, I can't really remember, but I remember this moment vividly, as do the rest of my players, because we still, to this day, talk about it. And what's not to talk about? How many emotions did the party cycle through in such a short sequence of events? There was urgency, anger, fear, and then grief, each one leading into the next with no breaks in between. Now, I know the counter-argument for this scene in particular is that, well, Billy, of course you had a high emotional impact. You killed someone. It's always emotional when a PC dies. And no, it's really not. I'll even give an example of a time where I killed someone's character and there was no emotional weight behind it. No reaction other than, man, that sucked. And, ugh, really? Or, oh well. So, also in Curse of Strahd, but in a different group and at a later date. Look, I really like the campaign. I've run it 6 times now, all for different groups. Don't judge me. Don't worry, no spoilers this time. my players were exploring a dungeon when suddenly they get into a fight with an NPC. An NPC who they did not know before the dungeon, who they had zero emotional connection with, and who they knew basically nothing about. The NPC tries to run away, with the party giving chase. During the fight, the NPC manages to knock out the Blood Hunter and threatens the rest of the party that if they try anything funny, he'll kill the unconscious PC. The Warlock proceeds to attempt to Eldritch Blast the weakened NPC, misses, and as a result, they make good on their word and kill the downed PC.
お前はもう死んでいる。何?
The NPC is then promptly killed, and my players finish the dungeon at some point after. Notice how I didn't go into nearly as much detail? Well, other than avoiding spoilers, to be honest, that is legitimately all I can remember. My players weren't sad when their friend died. They weren't angry. They were upset that their friend died essentially just to a couple of bad dice rolls. While I don't think the death was unfair per se, it was, after all, a result of the actions of the players. I don't exactly feel good about it either. It was a lesson learned for sure though. Death, for the sake of death, is not impactful, it's not emotional, it's at best confusing, or at worst, it's upsetting. A lesson I had to, unfortunately, learn the hard way. That being said, if death is built up to and properly earned, then yes, it's a great emotional piece that your players will likely remember for many years to come. Just don't use it exclusively or as the only tool to bring emotions, even if I may rely on it a little too much myself. So, what are some other ways you can get your players truly emotionally invested into your game/setting? Well, it's a tip you've heard every other YouTuber suggest, and I'm going to parrot it here. But it's a good one, and it really does help. Work your PC's backstories into the campaign. Your fighter's farm was burnt to the ground by a man with a snake tattoo? Well, what if that man with the snake tattoo works for the big bad of the campaign, and the fighter runs into him again in a random village, challenges him to a fight, and then gets his butt whooped? That's gonna make it feel much, much better when they rematch and your fighter gets to absolutely trounce the guy later on. Or your bard is searching for the necklace of his mother sold off to make rent while he was a child. A necklace very near and dear to her heart, and now, as she lays old and weary, she often thinks about that old piece of jewelry. Suddenly, in the middle of this bustling city, he spots a young girl wearing the necklace he's been after all these decades, and as he's about to procure it, he learns that this has become an heirloom of sorts for her family, how it's the last thing this young child has to remember of her mother. Now the bard has a difficult, emotional choice to make for their character. One they'll remember much, much better than just that time they killed a random goblin with vicious mockery, even if that was pretty awesome and funny. Of course, my favorite trick I've learned so far, other than the dramatic death scene, is putting NPCs, or even better, previous PCs, in mortal danger. Recently, my players have started playing Tomb of Annihilation. To give a quick rundown of the hook to the game, there is a death curse affecting all of the Sword Coast right now, possibly even the entire world. Anyone who dies cannot be resurrected, and anyone who has died previously and been resurrected in the past is slowly dying, with there being no magic able to counteract it. Here's the kicker. My players have had several characters that have died and been brought back before, so as a result, they're now affected by this curse, with there being nothing that can be done about it. So, instead of using the boring hook the book gave me, where some random NPC tells the party, go stop this curse and I'll maybe give you gold or something, they're instead being asked by a friend of the old party, my friends, your old characters are dying, and I'm desperate to save them. And while the new characters may be in it for the gold or the adventure or whatever, the players were invested since session 1, as the happily ever after they worked so hard for in the previous campaign is slipping out of their fingers, and I can't wait to to cause even more emotional turmoil throughout the campaign. In summation, while it's cool and fun to have these awesome set pieces where the players behead a dragon or subvert the DM's expectations by using their spells in a really creative way, the thing your players are really going to remember, the things your players are really going to take away from your game long after you finish playing, is going to be the time you made them cry, or the time they had an NPC really piss them off, or the time you threatened to kill the druid's husband if they didn't complete the adventure in time. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Sorry this one took so long to get out. I am working on the next one already. Hopefully it doesn't take as long to get out. I just want to say, if you enjoy D&D, if you enjoy the content I make here, I do stream D&D over at twitch.tv/BillyTheCorgi. Feel free to stop by if you want to see moments like this.
Was it a normal person of someone of your stature?
What the fuck?
What do you mean? You mean normal person or someone of your stature? What are you talking about?
I mean,
The freaks with you 5 feet high and over. What the hell are you talking about?
I might be
ass.
a virgin, but at least they can't pick me up, and you know.
Some would say that's a downside.